All right, we are going to begin today's meeting of the Data Analysis Technology Advisory Board. My apologies to everyone, particularly those of you online for the delay in this. We had some technical difficulties. We're very grateful to Sam for rescuing us from um, hybrid meeting oblivion. And thank you to those of you that made it in person for this. So we'll do kind of an expedited version of this and hopefully we'll be done in about an hour. From there. So we'll go a little more quickly, but if folks want to dig into something in more detail, we can always set up a follow-up time. And again, thanks for your patience kind of getting this started. I am going to go through the board membership just so I first off know who's here and we can refresh everything. I'll introduce myself. I'm the board chair, Scott Gall. I'm the chief data officer of state of Connecticut. We have our colleague Alfredo Herrera is the geographic information officer, one of the other ex officio members of the board that's here, and I'm going to go through the appointed members quickly through Representative Ritter. We have Thad Demkowski and Seth Klaskin. Thad, Seth, do you want to say hi? You're both here.
Hello, Scott.
Hi there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Through Senator Looney's office, we have Michelle Reardon-Nold and Adler Coffey. I did not see Adler, but Michelle, you were here.
Aye, present.
Okay. I don't see Adler. That changes. Through Rep. Candelora's office, Bree Berner. I think Bree, you were just joining. Are you there? Sorry for I see Bree online. And then from the several different non-voting members appointed through Department of Administrative Services, Dave Labadia.
Morning.
Morning. From Freedom of Information Commission, Colleen Murphy, and I didn't see her online. I thought someone from FOIC might be here, but I don't see them yet. From the Attorney General's office, John Newman.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you, John. From the Judicial Branch through the Chief Court Administrator, Joe Grealish.
Hi, Scott.
Thanks, Joe. Through the State Treasurers, Christopher Regan.
Good morning.
Through the Secretary of State's office, in here in person, Jennifer.
Good morning.
Farrell.
Present.
Oh, I skipped also here, our state librarian, Deborah Schonder.
Good morning, everybody.
Through the Comptroller's office, Michelle Carlos, I saw you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Wonderful. So I think that that's all the board members here. I think we're just down one person. Again, thank you for your patience and sorry for kind of taking a while to get this started. Hopefully you see on the screen the slide deck, and I'll kind of just do a quick introduction and then we'll get into some of the presentations. Can someone just confirm you see the slide deck?
Full visual, Scott.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Thad. So we're doing welcome introductions. As with most of the meetings, we're going to go through the goals of the state data plan. So we have 6 goals in the state data plan. We're going to review sort of current status on a few of those. And then we'll get presentation on a report about setting up a data intermediary for nonprofit data that focused on disconnected youth. And so that'll start at about 10 o'clock and we'll go through some of this beforehand. These are the powers and duties of the board. I'll skip this just in the interest of time. And then we've got 6 goals in the state data plan. And the first one I want to talk about was developing an enterprise data sharing approach. This is kind of the goal as it's written in the state data plan. And it is trying to, again, like we've talked about in the past, strike the balance between enabling the secure standard sharing of data between state agencies and other partners while preserving privacy, confidentiality, security for the individuals whose data are being shared. So we're looking at building on some frameworks that we have for data sharing across agencies and making those a little more robust and responsive. So we're going to get a hopefully quick kind of update on that. We're developing a secure data enclave that Adriana Sanchez Dominici, who's our project manager for it, will go through in a second. And then Katie Breslin to my left will go through some of the changes to the legal framework that will allow that. And again, this is one where I think we could probably spend all day talking about this topic, but we're going to go through kind of at a high level. And if there's topics the board members you want to call out any points or have us come back to something in a future meeting, let me know. So, Adriana, I will turn the mic over to you.
Thanks.
all
Good
slide.
morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay in the room and online. So Scott, as Scott mentioned, I'm the project manager for the Data Link CT, formerly P20 Win Secure Data Enclave that we have been building in collaboration with some folks over at the Department of Administrative Services BITS team. We have some folks over there partnering with us to get this really off the ground and sort of rolling. This slide here really just kind of shows the executive board resolution, which really sort of states the components that we're sort of working towards as approved by the board. But Scott, if we flip to the next slide, that has a little bit more of a summary of kind of like the goals that I think are just a little bit more clear to kind of take a look at. So kind of in alignment with the state data plan, really overarching all of the goals is to establish sort of model guidelines for secure standard data sharing across different agencies to sort of support cross-agency collaboration. And as we've kind of been doing this project, we've heard more and more from different agencies that are really interested in doing this for different purposes. So we've engaged with a couple different agencies while we're in the midst of building this environment on our own, sort of hearing them sort of talking through some areas where they're looking to build something similar or just really learn what we're doing with Data Link CT. So this is becoming like a growing need across different agencies. So it's nice to kind of be in the position where we can kind of work through these things and figure out answers and solutions that might help other agencies. On the other side here, we sort of kind of have the overarching kind of high level goals. Oh, Scott, if you could just go back one, thank you. These are really the goals of the enclave, really sort of focusing on, again, reducing the manual data movement, securely matching PII, making sure that we have sort of space to host agency data to support data requests, providing a modern and secure analytics environment for those who are interested in sort of requesting the data and using it for their purposes. And this last piece here, really just supporting evolving sort of needs for agencies to do data reporting and transparency. Next slide. Thanks, Scott. This one's pretty quick. This is really just like our timeline, which has been sort of evolving. We're kind of working in this sort of agile fashion with the folks over at BITS to really continuously like learn of the different needs and growing needs of the agencies with respect to, reporting data, sharing data, and using data across the state. So this is really just our timeline started earlier this year when I was onboarded, doing project planning, requirements gathering. We're in the midst of development and testing. You'll see that both development and testing are in yellow. And that's because, again, we're working in this sort of agile fashion where we test kind of as we go. We are sort of building solutions, proving concepts, and testing and sort of shifting and jiving as we kind of work through things. Next slide. This is a little bit more detail of kind of where we are right now. So the gist of it, we're developing this environment in Microsoft Azure. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're working on sort of these segmented folder structure for file storage that we call red, yellow, and green, but really just kind of depicts the different levels of sensitivity of the data that we're kind of working with. If you're familiar with the data request process, we do, use PII data, so we have to make sure that we're sort of handling that appropriately and making sure that only folks who need access to it for the purposes of data matching have access to it. So that's kind of what we're looking to sort of mirror in the Azure environment. The second piece here is our integration with Axway Secure File Transfer. This is already in place and being used today to support data requests. So really, we're just kind of working through and learning how to integrate that with the Azure environment. Third piece here is something that kind of is through and through, does not stop, engaging with different agencies, participating agencies, partner agencies, and just making sure that we're listening and hearing and kind of executing on the initial requirements that we sort of gathered. So this really engaging with agencies, even in fashions like this, to kind of hear from different folks is something that doesn't stop throughout the process. For Katie, we'll talk a little bit more about just after this, really just making sure that we're in the midst of updating policies and processes. So when we're going to be moving towards the adoption of the enclave, obviously all the processes have to be sort of properly documented and updated. And we've been doing a lot of policy work alongside the development. Last piece here is about data ladder and migrating data ladder to the cloud so that we can sort of integrate it into the environment. Data ladder is a tool that's currently used for data matching by the Department of Labor, who serve as a data integration hub for Data Link CT. So we're migrating that tool over to the cloud so that we can get it into the Azure environment and make sure that data matching is happening in that environment as well. I think that's my last slide, Scott. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Katie Breslin. I'm the data governance coordinator. So this slide is looking at what we're calling Policy Palooza, because we're really making a concerted effort to formalize our governance by really highlighting what our values are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. We have a really long list of policies that we've really worked on establishing and getting adopted by our data governing board. Many of these are new, but data quality and data classification policies have been approved. Our data privacy policy is in review. We're updating our data security policy, and we're working on data retention and destruction and data matching. So it's an ever going process, but really it's helping us clarify like what is important to us as a data system and how are we going to protect and preserve our residents' data that is shared for data projects. So that's the policy. Moving on, another component of this project is updating our legal agreements. So DataLink CT, formerly P20 Win, uses a tiered structure of legal agreements to share data. Current structure is an enterprise MOU and a data sharing agreement, but as we are updating the system, we're including a data use license to further distinguish roles and responsibilities. This process, this structure really makes it more flexible and transparent so that agreements can be better understood by a larger audience, but also so that we can really clarify who's doing what at what point. If you want to go to the next slide. So the enterprise MOU is something that all of our participating agencies sign. So it's this foundational agreement. I like to think of it as the rules of the sandbox. It outlines what you can do and how you can do it, but it doesn't obligate anybody to participate. It's not specific to any one agency. It's really broad, and it really focuses on how the system functions, what our governance structure is, what our technical processes are. As we're moving from our current system, which is rather manual, to this enclave, we need to update this EMOU to reflect this new environment. So these updates really won't happen until after the enclave is live. If you want to go to the next slide. So the data sharing agreement is a more formal document. The current structure includes all parties. So the data integration hub who does the matching, the operating group that oversees the entire process, the participating agencies that are providing data for an approved request, but also the data recipient. So it's a real large document that outlines the purpose of the project, who the roles and responsibilities of each individual party, and it includes the specifications for what allows each agency to share data for that project. So it's specific to the agency, it's specific to the laws and regulations that allow data sharing, and it's specific to the project, and it includes time limits and other requirements to access those data. Then the future state would have this only include participating agencies just because the laws that apply to data recipients or data requesters vary from those that are state agencies, and that distinction will help clarify the process. And then if you want to go to the next slide, and so the data use license, not a lot of information here, but we imagine, and we've used this in a few requests now, but it really helps differentiate the roles and responsibilities of the data requester. So this is specifically between the agencies that are making the system function, so like the operating group or the participating agency or the data provider, and the entity that will be receiving or accessing data for an approved request. So this is sort of the current and future state of the legal agreements for our enterprise data sharing. I went through it real fast, but if you have any questions, let me know. This is, like I said, an ongoing project.
Thanks. So we'll see if there's anything from the board members you wanted to flag or comment or advise on some area. Again, I apologize for kind of going through this briskly. This is a topic that deserves a little more time, but we're constrained today. Seeing
Hi.
hands raised. Oh, there we go. Seth.
Yeah. Hi, I'm sorry I didn't do the electronic hand raise. Just quickly, I know P20 Win was largely housed at UConn. Is this data sharing initiative also housed at UConn?
So it was historically it was in the state college system until 2020, and then the administration of it moved to OPM through an MOU in 2020. In 2020, we moved the administration to OPM, and then that got codified into statute. Actually, this is something we should have covered in this slides with maybe a little more time, but that codified in Public Act 25-119 from this year. So OPM is the administrator for it. The rationale being that we're in a good position both with having sort of the data functions in OPM as an agency, and it's got a good bird's eye view into different data sharing projects in state government. And I think one of the challenges from the college system side was it was always sort of coming from the higher ed perspective, and they just weren't part of every single type of data sharing activity that goes on.
And can I ask also, I understand that the data sharing and this initiative are through the auspices of OPM, but DAS traditionally has been the tech arm, and BEST have been the tech arm of the state. Does DAS have a role in this, or how does that interplay?
Yeah, and I'll see if we can call on Dave Labadia in a second to weigh in because he's our DAS rep to the board. Historically, again, partly because it was in the state college system that does not sit under state IT, so they don't use the state IT policies or the infrastructure. There was not a strong relationship. So that's something we've tried to build in the last few years since it moved to OPM. So we've gotten a seat on the data governing board for that for a DAS representative, which is Bob Berry, who's been wonderful in that process. And so there's a representative from state IT that's directly involved in what I think if we had more time, Adrian would have talked about in the secure data enclave development is we're working really like hand in glove with state IT on the development of that. Where the development is being done in-house, it's insourced, it's not being outsourced. And so that's really the work of it is being done by folks in what's now BITS, Bureau of Information Technology Solutions, working very closely with them. So they're building the infrastructure, and OPM will manage sort of the governance and the process aspects of it. But we're really reliant on state IT for the infrastructure, and it's been good, I think, to have the transition to enable a better working relationship with them than we were able to have in the past. But I don't know, Dave, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on that.
Scott, I think you pretty much nailed it. I think it's a great partnership. There's obviously BITS activity in partnering on the build out, and as well as the associated ownership of the technologies underlying. So the Azure environment, I believe, is our enterprise tenant, and would sort of fall into the realm of responsibilities of that team. So I don't think anything beyond what you stated is different than my understandings right now. So thanks.
Thank you both. That's a very interesting collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I'll just like a concrete example of that is that we're using the Azure environment for the secure data enclave, and that's able to build on knowledge that now BITS has developed over implementing secure Azure environments across a handful of state agencies. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel or start from scratch because they've done that with a handful of individual agencies now. And now it's a little more complex because it's across agencies. It just makes it a faster and easier process. We're using the same enterprise software, like what Adriana was talking about. Axway is the software that all agencies use for secure file transfer, or they're supposed to use. So, all right. Any other remarks on kind of the data sharing goals for this? And again, we could spend a lot longer on it, but in the interest of time, if there's nothing else, we'll move to our next topic, which is returning to the first goal, which is focused on open data in the state data plan. So the goal kind of, again, as written, highlights accessibility, visibility, transparency. We learned through the engagement for developing the state data plan that is not as easy as probably we would like for people to access and understand some of the tools that are there. We're going to make sure that agencies are using and posting data to the open data portal, the geodata portal, their own websites in a way that makes sense for them. And so Augusta Hirochuku, who's taken on the open data responsibility since the last board meeting, will go through some of what has been worked on in the past few months momentarily. Like, you just tell me.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Augusta Irachuku. I'm the open data analyst taking over some of the responsibilities related to the open data work. One aspect of completing this particular goal is to work on the open data access plans. This is required by the Connecticut General Statute for executive agencies. In addition, there are agencies that have voluntarily decided to participate in this process. So those agencies will also be creating a plan. This is a plan to detail the agency's plan to publish open data, public data, as well as protected data that can be made public through aggregation or redaction. The first time this process took place was in 2019. And so we are currently restarting this process up with the various agency data officers and their team. Next slide, please. So this is our current timeline that we're kind of working off of. We first introduced this to the agency data officers at our quarterly meeting in June. And then we are from August to about November going to meet with the various agency data officers and their team to go through some of the brainstorming questions and have a discussion in hopes to gain some insight into their plans or potential goals for their agency. And then between November and December, we hope that agencies will submit their plans. And then either at the end of the year or early next year, we hope to make those plans available. These dates are still to be determined, but that is our current proposed timeline. And then our goal is maybe next summer to follow up on the progress made towards those goals and things of that nature. Next slide, please. These are the questions I believe that were presented at the last board meeting. These are just questions to guide the discussion to see what data agencies are currently making available, what data that has potentially been requested from their agency in the past, and then other processes or procedural improvements that they can make within their agency that support the publishing of open data. Next slide, please. And our ask for you all today is we are currently developing a template. And so we'd like to get a better sense of what information would you like to see in the agency's open data access plan. We posed the same question to the agency data officers at our quarterly touch point. And some of the components that were provided as feedback were maybe some risks or challenges for each of the goals selected or specific target dates and or lessons learned related to the goal. And so what we'll show you next are two federal open data plans that we are using as an example for this template. Next slide. So this one is the U.S. Department of Agriculture's open data plan. You can read the details, but mostly it's just focusing on the components of their particular goal. They have the goal or vision. They have listed here the related ongoing activities as well as their future plans that they would like to accomplish over the next coming year, I believe. And the next example, next slide, please, is the U.S. Department of Education's Open Data Access Plan. They have a goal, a particular task, which is more of like a subtask, and their approach, which provides context as well as a subtask related to that. And they also include benchmarks. I know we're rushed for time, but after looking at these examples, we'd love to hear if there's anything that jumps out at you that you would recommend us including as a component, or if something jumps at you a little bit later, we would love to hear the feedback as to what we could include in this particular template. Thank you.
Just
I see a hand from Thad and Michelle in that order. And again, it would really help to the extent possible now and we're happy to engage with folks later. to understand things that you'd like to see in the open data access plans as we go through the process that Augusta outlined of meeting with agencies to come up with the plans. Thad, you're first.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Just Augusta, a quick question. The Department of Transportation has been successfully sharing open data now for some time, and I just want to know if you'd like us to file a plan with you, or like I said, if we've been doing this successfully, what's required of us just so that we can be in compliance with your request.
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Sure, no
There's an
problem.
echo in the room. I can repeat so Thad, you're asking because DOT already produces a lot of open data. What would an agency like DOT that already is pretty active in publishing data, what would they put into the plan? Is that sort of the gist of?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are a couple of agencies that are pretty active in doing that, and it's great that DOT is doing that as well. But something similar to like standard operating procedures, if there's something that your agency is already currently working on, that's something that could be put into the plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be strictly about publishing more data if you already have published as much as you could, or if there is a new set of data that you would like to produce. There are pieces where people are talking about having a procedure to automate information or process to release open data, and things like that can also be included in the plan. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And just to follow up, who do we send this information to, or who are we directing it to?
Yeah, it goes. Sorry, the echo is a little tough. Ultimately the plans will get reported in this case to me. It's part of the I think like Augusta outlined as a statutory requirement that we haven't really leaned in on. But it would go through the agency data officers. So for DOT, Greg Ciparelli, and we'll kind of convene meetings. We're doing them in waves so that it's manageable for the agencies basically. So I think we have not reached out to DOT yet, to my knowledge. So that'll come in October or November. We're just trying to manage our own bandwidth for meetings. I wanted to call on Michelle quickly. I think she might have dropped, but I know she had to leave the meeting and she had a hand up before. I don't know if she's still there. Or I saw. Okay, there you are, Michelle. Did you want to say something?
No, it's okay. But I do have to jump, Scott, so thank you.
Okay. The door is open for your comments in the future. So, all right. Anyone else on the open data access plans? We'll send the slides out. There's links to the federal agency plan. So this is a process again that we sort of tried once at the state level, and federal agencies have been doing this to varying degrees for some time now. So again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel on this. And if there's something in the federal plans or something that you'd like to see in the state open data access plans that you want to flag for us, it would be great to hear that now, because our hope is by the time we have the next meeting, we'll pretty far down the runway on getting those compiled. Hearing and seeing nothing, we will go to I'm going to go quickly through goal 2. Oh, okay. And then we're on training. So this, there's not a lot that we're going to cover today about metadata and documentation. This is sort of a companion goal to the open data and transparency goals, to make sure that when we're publishing, making data accessible for users, whether it's through one of the portals or through an agency website, that there's sufficient documentation for people to understand what that data is. The one thing that, and I'm going to ask if we maybe hold this for a future conversation. We had I think a robust discussion in the last board meeting with Nick from FOIC, kind of engaged with some questions about that, and then we had sort of a follow-up discussion about that. I don't know if you want to briefly touch on it today, Nick, but we could go into it in a little more detail in a future meeting. I know you joined sort of partway through the meeting, but we're a little crunched for time because of the technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting. But I think this is an area where we want to make sure the documentation helps people understand the different pathways that they have to access data, what they have right to know, where it sort of meets the right to know capabilities through FOI and other mechanisms.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Smart with the FOIC. Yeah, I don't think and it's not it's strictly necessary to address it now. I think I know there was some difficulty hearing me at the last meeting, so kind of wanted to clarify some of the points I was making. It was really just a distinction between the technical legal meaning of a public record and how I heard it being discussed at the last meeting. And I understand kind of through subsequent conversations, it was kind of more maybe just more of a shorthand. I love the opportunity to go into it a little bit more in depth and making sure that everyone kind of understands that there's still the legal obligation for all public records to make sure that when the request comes in that a search is done, and if there is an exemption, then the actual standard is applied, but it's not strictly necessary right now. I'd be happy to do it at another meeting.
Sorry. Thank you, Nick. Again, I apologize that for those of us in the room, there's an echo. It's a little tough to make everything out, which is tough for you because I think the audio was a challenge last time. But I think what we'll do, I will prep a little further in advance and we'll go into like a more detailed discussion about the definition of public record and some of the other terms in the next meeting, because I think that's worth spending some time on. Does that seem reasonable?
If you can hear me, that sounds good. I apologize. I'll see what I can do for the audio next time.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to start this on the fourth goal, and we'll go through this again, hopefully relatively quickly. And we have another presenter coming in a second. I have to make sure she has the correct link to this because I may have forgotten to do that. But we'll go through this fourth goal, and I'll cover it briefly. And then Vanessa Reinecke, who is our wonderful and capable intern from the Yukon School of Public Policy for this year, is going to help us make progress on this goal. But the fourth goal is to look at the job classifications that we have in state service for kind of data analytics roles, GIS roles writ broadly. This has been, I think, a long-term concern from a lot of agencies that the way our job specifications are written does not allow them to fully attract and retain skilled professionals. So we're looking at where we can both kind of diagnose some of the issues and then propose some solutions to that over time. I'll kind of introduce this here and then hand it over to Vanessa in a second. The work that we're doing, again, is really to hopefully look at what we have in the current job specifications, identify where there's challenges, either attracting or retaining talent, and then make recommendations to kind of the appropriate folks in state HR and labor relations to adjust those. We will not be able to change everything I'm sure that people want, but we have to start by like understanding and diagnosing the problem to begin with. I pulled this quote from this is a document written on hiring digital service talent, which is a similar but slightly different skill set. It's through the Beck Center, which is at Georgetown University, and they wrote up like a nice guidebook on this. And this quote, again, hopefully helps reinforce that we're not reinventing the wheel here. There's a sort of pathway for this, and Vanessa will talk in a second about what some other states have done. But to attract and retain talent, you have to do basically what you're going to hear us say that we're going to do, which is work with HR, identify the challenges with the job classifications, update the definitions where possible, look at augmenting that in some cases through things like internships, fellowships, other areas where you can sort of add capacity to the workforce. And those are the sort of core elements that we'll talk through in a second, as evidenced by the fact that we are working with our wonderful and talented School of Public Policy intern on this very project. So I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so I'm Vanessa, as you mentioned. So we're kind of
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can I just add one more thing, Scott, to
Beth, yeah.
last slide? You can change descriptions, update them, and find ways to recruit data talent. But I think one thing that you might want to consider adding to this is improve the state's capacity to understand and hire data talent, because I don't know what the situation is. They may have people in HR that are keen at interviewing and reviewing resumes and all of that for data professionals in particular, or they may not. And so, you need to have someone there and the capacity there to make sure that you can. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's our kind of the first item to go back to this quote here. The first item is kind of building the partnerships with HR, so that's where we're trying to work kind of hand in glove with them at the outset. So this is not something that fits into the context within which agencies operate. And that I see a hand from you too.
Yeah, just real quick, Scott, just to piggyback on what Seth said, I really think it's an organization by organization basis. I know at the DOT, when we go through our interview process, we're very diligent and cognizant when we go through the interview questions and speaking with candidates and reviewing the resumes that are passed through to us about reviewing their skill sets and their knowledge and their background. I think one of the biggest challenges is just looking at the applications that do go through that initial filtering process. And I'd love to kind of have a review of that initial filtering process just to see if there are resumes that maybe should be getting through that aren't getting through based on qualifications that the filtering process is applying. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you. And Alfredo, you have a comment.
So, as someone who is going through this process at the moment, I would, the thing that I would add there is I think some of I think the thing is that the process varies, like Thad said, wildly between agencies, and it can be in some agencies it can be pretty straightforward, and we get really great candidates, and other agencies may struggle with this, mostly due to either knowledge or capacity on either the hiring manager side or the HR side. It's a mix of kind of all of these situations. So I think the effort here is really to kind of create a baseline framework from which we can all operate so that we can understand like what it does actually take to hire good qualified data people in all of the various roles, whether they be spatial or non-spatial.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Dave, hand up. This topic always
Yeah,
generates
this is a great conversation, dear to my heart. I just, guidance to the group is, I think data practice and data positions span many areas of government. And so, will we be able to kind of address sort of IT roles versus business roles versus pure data roles, right? And just taking that into consideration that they don't all sort of fit in one bucket. So just as you move forward in that investigation, think about that and how we can hire throughout the organization and satisfy business needs from top to bottom.
Yes, I think you will be pleasantly surprised the next set of slides. Again, hopefully we're not it's not the only state with this kind of challenge, so we can build on some work done from different peers. So Vanessa is going to cover the next two slides. It says it on it. I just want to be super clear with people. These are from the state of Oregon. These are not our slides, so we just stole them from the work that Oregon is doing. So they're from another state. Just to be super clear.
Yes, they are from Oregon. So the model that Oregon went with is kind of like it says, drafting these initial data positions. So they gathered all of the positions that they had under data, and then on the next slide, when Scott comes back, he stepped away from his chair for a second. But on the next slide, they consolidated them down to just 4 kind of more broader categories that do focus on, to that last comment, that do focus on which ones are kind of working more specifically on the business insights, which ones are working with data specifically, and kind of to that point. Yes. And then you can actually go to the next one too. So what we're trying to do is, so learn from Oregon to attract the talent to Connecticut, and then kind of keep and make Connecticut competitive. So kind of to those first couple of points of how we're hiring and retaining that. And then we're also going to review them like Oregon did to kind of try to have more informative job classes. And then last slide is just a little bit of the work we've already done so far. So using the comptroller's published data set of open payroll in the open data portal, there are just shy of 1,600 employees with jobs containing the tags research, data, info, and IT. And of those 1,600 jobs, they're across 93 departments. So this is like, or excuse me, 47 agencies, 93 different job titles. So this is a large scale project that we're trying to kind of consolidate almost into a more packageable and digestible deliverable for potential employees. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, Vanessa is a wonderful example of where we're able to kind of augment capacity. To do this, she'll be around through next spring. So our timeline is that we can sort of go through some of this review. We just started collecting the data last week or so, go through some of the review, meet with agencies, identify some of the challenges that they experience day to day, and then propose some actionable recommendations. Hopefully by next spring. So you'll continue to hear about this at the subsequent meetings, and we'll kind of see what progress we're able to make. But again, other states have done this, and hopefully there's enough interest and momentum that we can make some progress here. Any other comments from board members? Let's see.
Scott?
Yes, John.
Just real quick, I appreciate very much the review through the open portal, ironically enough, for the salaries. I'd also recommend looking through contracts. My guess is that a lot of agencies are meeting some of their talent needs through contract rather than through employees. So that might be a rich source of information in this endeavor as well.
That is an excellent point. Unfortunately, we have another fellow from the governor's office working on a project with contracts with us, so she will learn a lot about state contracting data in the next several months. Maybe we'll help with that. Yeah, good point.
Can I just add one more thing? There's I know that sometimes, from being a former state manager, I know that sometimes an agency has a need and it's hard sometimes, and it's a longer process to fill that need. And also there could be a more efficient, less expensive way to fill that need, by turning to vendors, and not having carrying costs, and salary plus fringe and all of that. We do have public-private partnerships that could be looked to fill that role too. And I know Michelle had to jump, but for example, I'm sorry, my dog wants to make a guest appearance here. For example, maybe CT Data can help agencies that are on a wait list to hire data staffing and can't, or maybe even serve a more permanent function at a very low cost. So those are just some things to consider.
Yeah, and I'll pull back the original site because it's a little buried, but they do talk about looking at other kind of different ways to augment capacity. It cites internships, fellowships here. I think contracting kind of falls in the same bucket, and so we should make sure that we're surveying kind of all the different tools in the toolkit here. That makes sense. And there's good, I think, Seth, because you had brought up UConn and higher ed earlier. There's also been good opportunities through partnering with higher ed. We had a nice project that Alfredo shared with the GIS Advisory Council, working with the UConn data science program there. So there's some good programs that I think have some natural partnerships, and that's been a productive way to, again, kind of augment capacity. I'm going to, I think the next thing we have on the agenda, great. We're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to table our discussion of AI unless folks want to return to it. And we're going to review a report, and I'll share the slides in a second for this, that was issued earlier this year on bridging the data gap. The original intent was to meet a statutory requirement to report on a nonprofit, an intermediary for sharing data for nonprofits that serve disconnected youth. Manisha, I think, will give a brief introduction. Leanne Fong-Batkin from WestEd will walk through the report. For those of us in the room, if anybody has a mic on or your computer unmuted, if you can just mute the computer. I think we're getting a little echo in the room, so when Leanne speaks, I just want to make sure that's off. But I will kick it over, I think, to Manisha, and then
I can just
I'll pull up Leanne's slides in a sec.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Manisha Srivastava. I'm a special projects manager and economist at OPM. And as Scott said, this report was part of a study that was required pursuant to Public Act 24-45 to develop this state plan for a statewide data intermediary for nonprofits. And this was an outgrowth of the disconnected youth reports in the state. So in 2023, Dalio Education funded a report that found that there's 119,000 disconnected youth. The DAPA team at OPM is now going to be annually updating that report. In 2024, they found that there's a slight decrease, 106,000, but still, too many disconnected youth in the state. And so nonprofits play a key role in serving these youth. And so that's the driving force behind this plan, to understand what services they're receiving, what their needs may be, any gaps that may be there. OPM contracted with West Ed, and so we have Dr. Leanne Fong-Batkin with us today from California, who graciously offered to join us and present our findings. So Leanne, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Manisha. Hi, Scott. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. If you can start the slides, it'd be great, Scott. Thank you. This is listening to your conversation on IT, and such a challenge for state agencies. Good luck on that one.
Can you see the slides?
I can see them. Can everybody else?
Great.
Okay. Is my sound coming through? Okay. Manisha said there's an echo.
Yeah, there's still some echo in the room. I'm not 100% sure what any of us can do about it, but if you should, there's nothing you can do, Leanne, I think, so it would just keep going. And then I think for the folks online, it's fine. And it's just a little bit of echo in the room.
Sounds good. I'll speak a little slower and hopefully the echo will catch up. Okay, good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. I was really pleased to work with Scott and Manisha and their team collaboratively on this report. It's really an interesting topic. I think that disconnected youth is a very important issue. I also refer to them as opportunity youth. So if you hear that from me, that's the same type of group. So I am from the DISC Center at West Ed. We are called the Data Integration Support Center, and we help public agencies with technical assistance. So for planning, user-centered design, policy work, privacy, and my favorite, legal issues and legal data sharing. Next slide, please. As Scott mentioned already, we were working on ensuring that Public Act 2445 was implemented. And so we were directed to work with data intermediaries and nonprofits in Connecticut and figure out how can we serve disconnected youth better. As you know, the data in disconnected youth can be complicated because of how it's measured or not measured, or collected or not collected. I see some of our partners that we interviewed online. I'll give you a shout out in a little bit. And so we really wanted to figure out how can you develop a data structure or a data intermediary that would collect data from nonprofit organizations and then put that in a place where everybody can use it. So that's one of the goals of the study. Next slide, please. So who are disconnected youth? So in Connecticut statute, they are ages 14 through 26 inclusive. They could be an at-risk student enrolled in high school or not enrolled in high school. They have not attained a high school diploma, GED, or something like that. They're not employed and they're not enrolled in adult education or in a workforce program, or they may be incarcerated. So basically, youth that are not in school or work are what statute calls disconnected youth. Next slide, please. So what we did in this study is we surveyed Connecticut local educational agencies. We worked with State Department of Ed to get a list of the LEAs, the local educational agencies that serve grades 9 through 12. We also interviewed different nonprofits in Connecticut. And then we also interviewed data intermediaries in Connecticut and some that are nationwide. Next slide, please. So when we interviewed the schools, about 80 schools, the schools that responded identified 80 different organizations that they work with. And so if you get a copy of the report and you look at Appendix D, those different organizations are identified. Or, I'm sorry, Appendix B, as in boy. And then half of the students said that, or sorry, half of the LEAs provided data about students, and they connect students with other organizations, such as nonprofits that can provide more in-depth services than the schools can. The high schools really worked with organizations that provided mental health services, basic needs, and family involvement, such as parent support groups and workshops on different topics. Next slide, please. And we also interviewed nonprofits. So Kate and Geethika, and I think Michelle was here earlier from CT Data Collaborative. Thank you so much for being one of our partners in talking and learning about how you guys do what you do. So when we talk to the nonprofits, they will need a few things. So as you can imagine, the nonprofits in Connecticut range from the mom and pop shop all the way up to a large organization that may have a data quality manager. And the thing that really rung through clearly on the interviews was that the nonprofits will need technical assistance, training, and resources. Not everybody is familiar with data, and some, frankly, are intimidated by it. And so they would need somebody like CT Data or other data intermediaries to help come in, provide the training, walk them through the process of sharing data and things like that. So the resources was also another big issue that came up. And without additional funding and additional resources, nonprofits may have to decide, do they provide information and the data to that data intermediary, or do they provide more services to the groups that they serve? So there's really, really kind of a hard thing to choose between. And then also another main finding was that they wanted to share data with a known entity that they trust. And that was huge. And it had to be known for its protection and safeguarding of the data because you're sharing personally identifiable information. So a student's name, possible date of birth, maybe address, what school they attend, things that also get beyond FERPA. And so, they've got to really trust the organization that's going to be that data intermediary to keep their data safe and one that they trust. So next slide, please. Here's a slide that just kind of summarizes a little bit of what I talked about. But let's take a look at the benefits. What would the benefits be if you did have a data intermediary that collected data on disconnected youth? The nonprofits are like, oh, wow, we could use it for strategic planning. We can better understand state services. We can also use this data to apply for grants. And that way everything would be kind of in one place, and we would be able to use it for our benefit. And so a lot of them really wanted to understand also what youth are receiving services from multiple state agencies. So, that's another thing that they would want to learn. So as I mentioned, some of the concerns, definitely privacy and security are at the top of the list. And those issues are at the top of the list for many of the different organizations, different public agencies we work with. The resource limitations, and then we also had the lack of capacity that they have to provide the data and collect the data. Next slide, please. Okay. So for data intermediaries, some of the common features that we found is that they are the ones that collect information, usually data from other organizations. They have data sharing, security, and privacy protections in place. They have the ability to scale their infrastructure and possibly their scope if provided enough resources. They can create reports that are at the summary level for different organizations that they work with. They also have protocols in case if researchers want to access de-identified data. And then they also provide the training, support, and technical assistance. So, these are groups that can take the data and they would be a trusted source in Connecticut, do something with the data and give that back to the nonprofits. So the nonprofits can use that data, like we just mentioned, to apply for grants, to do strategic planning, or take a look to see how their services are going. Next slide, please. So we developed a couple different use cases, or what you can call examples, for how the state of Connecticut can implement this. So the first use case, of course, is let's just develop a new data environment. And, everyone's like, yeah, let's just build it from the top so we can just build exactly what we want. But again, this would be independent, but it would need a significant amount of time, funding, and resources from the state or from a philanthropic organization or whatever mix of that might be possible. So the benefit is that it's new and independent. So that would be your first option. Next slide, please. The second option, use case number 2, is using DataLink CT, now formerly P20Win, to build on their resources. However, again, they have limited capacity and limited resources, so they would need quite an infusion of resources, financial, human resources, infrastructure. And then another thing that came up is that we need to understand the local context of trust between DataLink CT and the nonprofits. Would the nonprofits trust DataLink CT? Do they work with them now? I don't think that many do, but Scott can correct me if I'm wrong. Next slide, please. So the next use case is to expand the capacity for current organizations. So you could, with enough resources again, expand the capacity of the current data intermediaries in Connecticut. Their areas of strength are that they do have the trust between them and the nonprofits. They can handle data. They are really, really well trusted in the Connecticut nonprofit community. We interviewed Dillinger, the CT Data Collaborative, and also Connie to learn about how they do what they do. So again, thanks to the CT Data Collaborative team for participating in our interviews. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've been talking about resources, and so everybody's like, well, what are the different funding options? And so this slide really just goes over the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. Again, I think the main thing that came through was that whatever option Connecticut chooses to go with, they will need resources. So this is just a slide to kind of summarize all that. It depends how much control or the state does or does not want over the program. But everybody does need additional resources, and it's a very tough budget environment no matter where you are. And especially, the local state budgets are being constrained over and over again. So the state will really need to decide how it wants to proceed. Next slide, please. So one other option that we came up with was that there's two things. So one is, thinking about how to incentivize a nonprofit to participate in the data intermediary. So, you're going to ask, what's in it for me? What's in it for my nonprofit? I'm already strapped with resources. I don't collect data right now. And so to do this, I'd have to hire another person or, somehow get resources to do this. And then also, what if I don't have the data chops or the data capacity to do this? So hopefully this program would include a data intermediary that could help step in, provide the training, the resources, the handholding that is needed. Because as you know, data can be great, but again, data can also be challenging. The other idea that we had was considering something like a pilot project. And I don't know about Connecticut, but a lot of states really like to try things out before they make it a reality. So, consideration, could be a pilot project that Connecticut thinks about. It would have to figure out what the goals are of collecting the data. Is there more than one that you can accomplish? What region maybe could you target, such as Hartford or any of the larger areas? It would need a work group or a steering committee to help make decisions about where this is going. Of course, it would need funding. You would need data sharing agreements. Absolutely. These are very, very important to protect all parties involved. It's possible that there may need to be statute. And then also you have to figure out, did it work? And how are you going to evaluate that? And if you build that in from the beginning, you understand what the goals of the project are and the data you're collecting and how you're collecting it, then you can build an evaluation in from the beginning versus looking at it towards the end of the project, which I've seen unfortunately a lot of folks do. So, there's just a ton of considerations that we need to consider. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. Open it up to any questions. And Scott and Manisha, you'll have to help me because I can't see the room.
Yeah, I will monitor. Thank you, Leanne. And I'll see if Jennifer has a question or a comment.
Thanks, Leanne. Jennifer Barahona. I'm with the state now, but came from an intermediary prior to coming to the state that's not listed here. So one of my questions was the mapping of the intermediaries. I understand that the LEAs provided those who they work most closely with. There were some surprising people on that list that like foundations and things, but I wasn't clear on the intermediaries and how they were identified because I think getting into expanding the capacity of current intermediaries, that's not an exhaustive list of current intermediaries, so it's hard to project resource needs without having first that more robust mapping. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So a very limited time and budget for the study. So we worked with Scott and Manisha to identify the intermediaries that they were already familiar with. For the nationwide ones, WestEd has done some work in other states, and we identified those as well. It is not an exhaustive list. I very much agree. If this project were to go forward, I would say that you would definitely want to do a larger search for other data intermediaries that exist, but also consider what other states are doing. And so we talked to Baltimore, we talked to a group in Colorado, and we also saw something called the Coleridge Institute that can provide a secure data enclave. And so there's a lot of different flavors of data intermediaries. But yeah, this study was not exhaustive. It didn't have the time or the budget to be able to do that. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks. I mean, I do see Baltimore Promise on here, which is an organization that Norwalk Acts, which I formerly led, brought to Connecticut as a model. And I would encourage, some of the nationwide groups. Baltimore Promise is part of the Strive Together network. There are 5 Strive Together partnerships in Connecticut alone, and they have been doing intermediary data work for a really long time and have already been talking about some of these recommendations for years and not having the resources to do so, particularly in the area of early childhood, since that's what all 5 of those groups are doing and have some really great existing data sharing agreements and some great partnerships with the Office of Early Childhood, et cetera. So I'd be happy to
just quickly add on. So it's definitely not an exhaustive list that we interviewed, but part of it was also we're looking at entities that operated statewide. So therefore you can see that was part of the selection process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although to the latter point of the, piloting, looking at something that's working really well in a smaller community that could be expanded. So anyway, happy to talk offline and support this because it's great work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott,
it looks like Kate has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah.
Kate, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just want to say thank you for including us in this project. And just to introduce, I'm here because Michelle Reardon-Nold, our exec director, is part of this group, but she had to step away for another conflict. But in terms of next steps in thinking about this, the Hartford Data Collaborative, which Geeta Fernando and I co-manage, have been doing this similar work, especially around opportunity youth, for the past 6 years. We have worked with nonprofits in Hartford. We do offer capacity building. We have data sharing agreements in place. I couldn't see who just spoke, But we are part of the Actionable Intelligence for Social Policy Network, a national network, and we've met with Baltimore Promise already. We've been sharing ideas with them for several years. And so we're eager to kind of jump into this and discuss it further. Just want to say that, you know, we're kind of, we've already known some of these steps because we've been doing this in Hartford. And if Hartford is part of a pilot, we'd love to be part of that since we've already built that infrastructure, built that trust, know all the large organizations who are doing work with Opportunity Youth and have collected data from them and linked it and shared it in the past and are still doing that ongoing work.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kate, for the CT data team putting a lot of time into this report as well. And I see Seth, you have a hand up.
Yeah, hi. I'm on the board of directors of CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. And it occurs to me that CABE and CAPS, which is the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, might be able to contribute mightily toward organizing a centralized approach to outreach to various LEAs around the state. So you might want to consider them as a partner or for partnership potential, not to provide the data, but to help facilitate an approach to get districts and boards bought in on contributing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a great idea. Let me just add two kind of comments on this. So one, we did through State Department of Education did reach out to all the local education, all the LEAs that had a high school in it. And so there's a survey, there's a little more detail in the report, and they were wonderful sort of partners for this. I think for some of the other comments too, again, this is one of, I think, a handful of presentations we've done of the final report. We took pretty seriously the statewide aspect of it in terms of the scoping. There are local data intermediaries. There's the 5 Strive communities. There's Hartford. There's some other pockets in the state. It's a real, to me, it was a real interesting question about what it would take to move that from the local level to the state level. I've not seen something where, you know, the 5 Strive communities do not operate under sort of like a single umbrella. We haven't sort of seen where that could expand. So to me, that was like a central question for the planning process here is we know that it can work at a local level that works nationally and in Connecticut, but seeing it move to a statewide level is really a sort of a category difference, particularly for some of those questions about trust and the relationships. There isn't that component there kind of with a natural statewide entity, or that was the process to identify if there's a place where that would sort of work statewide. So I think take the comments to kind of heart on this, that they're really, but again, the landscaping we saw is there's success at the local level and it just hasn't seen like a statewide initiative. Even Baltimore is a city level initiative for a large city, but
Yeah, I think that speaks to collaboration, pulling together the intermediaries to see what can be done in collaboration, given that the trust, local trust is so important as was, you know, indicated in the report.
Great.
okay, I don't know if Leanne or Manisha were going to say something else, but I'm going to stop this screen sharing. Any other comments from board members for this?
I mean, just to that point, I can mention that, you know, in the report, it talked about focus groups. So, you know, absolutely pulling together, getting more interviews, focus groups together, information before moving forward with anything. So completely agree.
Absolutely. Would have loved to talk to more and more nonprofits and data intermediaries, and even, you know, even and definitely more nonprofits because there's so many. But it's one of those things where you have to get the report done and come in and get some information and get out. But I really, really enjoyed meeting a ton of folks in Connecticut. It's a lot of fun for me to also dig into the topic of disconnected youth and really how to help. And I would say that the Dahlia report was one of the main ones that I read and read again because they were able to quantify the impact of disconnected youth on Connecticut's budget. And so that was a really interesting finding to read.
All right. Any other? Oh, I'm echoing somebody.
Hi, Scott. This is Geetika from CD Data. Again, I think Kate Eichel spoke earlier and mentioned about the Harvard Data Collaborative that we co-manage. One thing I wanted to elaborate is CD Data also do a lot of statewide work, a lot of our data strategic planning. We work with a lot of statewide nonprofits. And with the Harvard Data Collaborative work, we've already signed on over 80 EMOUs with local partners who serve youth in Hartford, and we also have a very good ongoing data sharing partnership with Hartford Public Schools as well. So just wanted to say it out loud. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I encourage folks, again, this is kind of the overview presentation. I encourage folks to review the full report. We'll put the link is in the meeting agenda, and we'll make sure the link is in the materials that go out after the meeting. I want to see if there's any other comments, topics that members want to discuss. Otherwise, I think this concludes our agenda for today. Dave, you wanted to add something? Oh, I forgot to, you wanted to bring something up earlier and I totally glossed over it. So let's see if this is that.
Sort of related. So just all great conversations that I love. I just wanted to make this group remind everybody of the Department of Justice's mandate for accessibility. It was sort of released back in 2024 with a pending deadline of April of 2026. And all it's saying is for state and local governments, anything that's presented online to the public has to meet a WCAG 2.1 AA, right? It's an accessibility standard to make sure everybody has fair access to whatever data and reports we're presenting online. And the reason I'm just saying it here is as we think about the technologies and the platforms included, we will be wrapping our arms around a majority of the state-owned platforms to satisfy some of those conditions. So as you're thinking about it, if you start sort of making these disparate decisions to host and or present data in places that aren't necessarily contained within that umbrella of work, you may be opening yourself up to rework and or public scrutiny around the ability to deliver that content to our public in mass. So if you're part of the accessibility work that our teams are doing and outreach around which applications your agency support, what platforms are included, great. If you're not, please reach out to me to see how we can sort of help guide and audit some of that opportunities. But just wanted to bring to this group just that general sense of awareness around things we are bringing online have an absolute need to be looked at in a different lens these days. Not that we don't feel that accessibility and usability is always a requirement, but now there's an actual mandate from the Department of Justice saying, hey, we're requiring you to do this by April of 2026. And the state of Connecticut falls within that. So sharing the news for everybody, because sometimes that comes as a surprise. But as we're bringing things to the public, we want to make sure we're keeping that into consideration.
Is an unexpected good alignment with the last presentation, because one of the things that took a little longer to release the report is, and we're grateful to Wested for doing this, is they reviewed it to make sure that the actual report and the PowerPoint documents that went with it met the accessibility standards from DOJ. So that took a little bit of extra time, but we think it's worth the effort, and grateful the Wested folks were able to do that for the report. But that's an example of, again, trying to meet those standards. There's an accessibility policy that now applies to state agencies to meet those standards. So we'll make sure that that's also in the meeting materials. And there should be resources coming to enable agencies to comply with those standards soon. So
thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Anyone else before we conclude? We did not formally open the meeting, so I do believe we do not need to formally adjourn the meeting, but thank you for those of you that made time, and particularly thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties at the beginning of this. My apologies for not kind of getting on top of that beforehand, and a special thanks to your unheralded hero for the day, Sam, who got all of this set up, which is not his job to do, but he did it. So thank you, and thanks for the patience for those of you that were in the Zoom room and those of you that were here. Waiting a little bit to get this meeting started. We will reconvene in December, and if there's topics that you want to dig into in more detail at that meeting or beforehand, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for your time and have a great fall.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.